Okay, well, I'm so excited to be here. And again, feel free to use the chat. I won't be seeing the chat for a little bit, but I will be sure to get to those questions at the end. So, in talking today about this new pandemic, supporting families in the mental health crisis, um, we Amelia always starts this presentation out by talking about her family and how the pandemic has affected her and her family. So she shares her story about one of her older girls that started experiencing some depression with the pandemic. We saw that quite a bit with the isolation. All of a sudden, within days, just a matter of days, everything in our lives changed so drastically that we just weren't ready and prepared for. Um, so she had one kiddo see that, and then the younger one with the open mouth down there at the bottom, um, start, and I believe, if I remember correctly, had some anxiety and ADHD. And when the pandemic hit, it made it even harder to manage the mental health because of all the new challenges we had. And especially, when it came to anxiety and HD, it definitely impacted people that already had mental health disorders. It made those symptoms even worse. But we also saw, like, her other daughter, people that had never experienced any type of mental health problems, all of a sudden were starting to experience mental health issues. But what made this really difficult is it wasn't just, that her children were struggling, um, because that meant it's also going to impact her and her spouse. And they have their own mental health, right? We all were trying to figure out how to do this. We're all struggling with our mental health. But as parents, we have to worry about the mental health of our children as well. And that's going to affect us. And so it was, as for parents, I know this has affected everybody in some way, but as parents, it really kind of put a little bit of that double whammy on there. Mental health challenges were a problem before the pandemic, but 48% of parents reported experiencing increased stress levels since the pandemic. And this was a study, I believe, by American Psychological Association, Stress in America 2021. So that's just this year. 48% reported an increased stress. That is up a half of it. And as mentioned, it's got that trickle effect. The mental and well-being, the mental and emotional well-being of a child is impacted by their parents' well-being, mentally, emotionally, and physically, and vice versa. As stress increases and parents are struggling to cope themselves, it's going to affect the kids and the entire family. And as the kids are struggling with their mental health, that's going to put added stress onto the parents. So we definitely saw this happen a lot in the last year and a half. And it's no wonder why. Look at the state of our world right now. These numbers are, again, from the American Psychological Association and represent the percentage of people feeling overwhelming stress from these issues. So COVID fear, remote work, social unrest, economic uncertainty, as well as political polarization. We've all seen how this has been impacted over this last year and a half. And it's no wonder that the stress levels have gone up. And that's on top of what people were already struggling with, the previous stressors. We're already on the verge of a mental health crisis before COVID, and COVID has only lit that on fire and put a spotlight on this huge issue. We had these stressors like mass shootings, climate change, immigration, sexual harassment or assault, opiate heroin epidemic, suicide rates. These were already there. Some of them have definitely seen an increase in the last year and a half. And then COVID was added on top of that. And so again, it was that we weren't ready for this. And what happened all of 2020, right? We've all heard 2020 was quite the year. But stress for parents during the pandemic, it was even higher. Things that added to that stress, things like education and basic needs, were some of the highest stressors for parents. Other things included disrupted routines, the family getting the virus, managing remote learning, meeting the basic needs as parents lost jobs or hours cut and kids were home more, as well as now we're seeing cost of things rising. And so it's just meeting the basic needs have added a really big stressor to parents. Other things that parents reported additional stressors being access to healthcare services and missing major milestones, things like graduation or the weddings. Some parents weren't able to get to the weddings. This last year, we've definitely seen people having to miss out on big events. And all of these things have added additional stress. So, but let's get down to it. What is all this stress doing? And why does this matter? Why does the added stress matter to what we're going through right now? Well, let's talk about the real effects of stress. So we know that through many studies and many reports out there, chronic stress is going to suppress the immune system. What that means is we're more likely to get sick. We're more likely to have colds and other illnesses, as well as stress leads to behavioral changes like decreased activity levels, more use of substances to cope. We've definitely seen an increase in substance abuse over the last year and a half, overeating, and withdrawing socially, which all of those can lead to mental health issues or can be a symptom, as we'll talk about in a little bit. We also see a decreased physical health, but with not just the illnesses, but it's going to also impact like the heart, the cardiovascular system, the digestive system, the endocrine system. It's going to play a role in how our body functions as well. But one of the main things I'm really here to talk to you guys today about is mental health, of course, because higher stress levels means it is more difficult to use healthy coping skills. And the use of healthy coping skills is extremely important when it comes to taking care of our mental health. So what is mental health? I found this number astonishing that 24% of parents have been diagnosed with a mental health disorder since the pandemic began. So basically 1 out of 4, which is so many to be actually diagnosed. But I want you to know that you don't have to have a diagnosis to be struggling with your mental health or to be having some of these symptoms. It doesn't mean you have to have a disorder. I really like the World Health Organization's definition on mental health, where it says mental health is a state of well-being in which an individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. Mental health has to do with our mental and emotional well-being, and it will significantly impact our lives in various ways, like I discussed on that last slide about illness, physical, our behaviors. It affects the way that we interact in the world and in our relationships. What I really like about this with the World Health Organization's definition here is it says can cope with the normal stresses of life. I think we know by now this last year and a half have not been the normal stresses of life. Getting through a pandemic, living through a pandemic is not normal. So this added stress that we have had over this last year and a half, it's kind of hard because it's made it's like it was already hard to cope, and then we added all of this. And so these struggles that people are having, know that they're understandable and that they're not alone. Everybody is definitely struggling with mental health right now. And we're not just talking about mental health right now, too. I want you guys to also know that we are in the mental health field extremely concerned about the mental health for years to come. We are facing a national mental health crisis that could yield serious health consequences for years to come. We know this in the mental health field. We are preparing for this, that we could see the effects for 10 more years of how this has affected everybody's mental health and their normal developmental processes in life. It's not like a vaccine that's just going to make things go away in the moment. These issues were here before COVID. COVID brought all these issues to the forefront and added new issues, and they're going to remain even after the pandemic is over. So why should employers care? What does it matter if employees are struggling with mental health challenges? Is it something that people should really get involved in? Definitely something that we want to start talking about is mental health in the workplace. A lot of people say, why? It really doesn't need to affect us. It doesn't matter. Mental health care actually does. It's now the most expensive condition that has the highest economic cost in the US. It is even more expensive than heart disease. It's not just economic cost. It doesn't even include what it costs employers outside of healthcare, in people dealing with caregiver fatigue, burnout, substance use. Those types of things definitely are what is causing this and adding even more expenses to that these costs. And this will definitely play a role in the workplace. So because what happens is mental health affects job performance between absenteeism, lost productivity. We see on average almost 35 workdays lost per person with a mental health illness, which we know from this slide that was just showed that it's okay, not just showed. I'm trying to think now. The slide earlier where we know at least with the parents, 24% of parents being diagnosed with a mental health disorder. And we also know about 41% of people are struggling with their mental health. And so we know that this is affecting a lot of people right now. So as you can see in this slide, this shows the blue is in lost productivity, the purple is in absenteeism for the different disorders that we see, depression, bipolar, anxiety, ADHD. And it definitely, when people are struggling with their mental health, they are more likely to be less productive and be missing work. These things, but this doesn't measure things like destructive leadership, negative social interactions, the effects of poor mental health on the company culture and the morale. So we see those things as well. Let me pull up. This is where Amelia kind of comes in, so I'm newer to this one. Okay. Impact on the workplace. Okay, this is what I know for sure. So why do we care? Not just financially, not just because they're going to miss a lot more work, but when people that are struggling with mental health, they're going to show up and they're going to have a harder time concentrating. They are less focused on completing their tasks and getting the job done correctly. So there are a lot more room for errors. Also, people with mental health very commonly struggle with sleep disturbances, which is going to decrease the work productivity, more mistakes, and more carelessness. as well as the physical issues that we talked about, and the illnesses, which is going to increase days and time work, but it's also increasing the more challenges that they're going to have when they're at work because of those physical issues that they're having. So not only are they going to miss more work, their productivity levels are going to be lower. And so it's definitely showing up in the workplace. How likely is this to show up in your company? How many? We know that these numbers are going to be really high, but what's even scarier to me, especially as a therapist in the mental health field, 50% of people are not seeking help. 50% of employees that are needing the help for mental health are not going to get it. And it's so hard to know this because we know that the help is out there, but why are these people not getting it? Well, we have these mental health care barriers. So first we have what's called structural barriers that prevent access to care for about a quarter of the world. This includes things like not being able to afford care, no appointments available, which is surely the case right now, where many clinics are backed up about 4 to 6 weeks. Transportation can be an issue. It may not be convenient due to location, business hours, and of course there's safety concerns because of COVID. Now, a survey that the World Health Organization did on 65,000 people suffering from mental illnesses, they uncovered something even more concerning than structural barriers, which is what is called attitudinal barriers. These are even more prevalent. It's a barrier for 96% of people who aren't receiving care that need it. So these are all made up of ideas and beliefs around mental health care, things like social stigmas, concerns about employers knowing that they're struggling, ideas around not needing care because they can handle it themselves, lack of understanding the severity of the problem that they're having. And this is a really, really big issue. So we have a long way to go on improving attitudinal barriers before we can see improvements in our employee populations. So how can we support our employees that are parents? We know that these parents are really struggling with mental health. Stress for parents, they are stretched right now, taking care of kids, online school, less support due to having like social distancing, places keep closing down, working from home, sometimes the kids are at school, at home, on top of needing to take care of their own mental well-being, feeling less emotional support than they felt before the pandemic. So some things we'll go over, policies that can help support families, having flexible options, including like wellness days, health hours, which are kind of like PTO. Some people do mental health hours, mental health days, having open dialogue communication, which is really helpful if that comes from the leaders, providing resources, which is going to encourage people to get help, and as well as having building a community. So let's talk about options, flexible options first. 96% of employees say that they need flexibility in the workplace, right? Parenting, raising families, it's not predictable, and it's even more predictable right now during the pandemic. Some of these flexible options can include remote work, flexible working hours, requiring less travel, and reduced hours or workload. Company flexibility can include those wellness days. Companies have, I know some companies that do like a half a day off for once a month, or every week, half a day off. That's the one I remember. Or they come in later that day. The whole company doesn't start until 12 o'clock, things like that. Having health hours like PTO, as well as paid family leave. It's kind of hard when people have to keep using, their vacation time or their sick time for family things that are needed for their kids. So having an open dialogue, the biggest step to normalize mental health is to talk about it. It helps for you to learn about it, have conversations around it, It's getting leadership to have those types of conversations. We're teaching it through trainings and workshops. We are seeing more and more companies do wellness fairs, and they're getting people to talk about it more. Other ways include training managers on how to talk to employees, webinars on variety of help options. I do those a lot for the company, for Nivati. I run a lot of different types of trainings for companies, so we can get that conversation going. And it's really important to practice confidentiality, because that is really important for employees to feel that they can have a place where they're not going to get into trouble for talking about it. Some best practices for opening the dialogue up is understanding signs and symptoms of mental health, creating a safe and confidential space like we just talked about, encouraging them to share their feelings, using good listening skills, learning what to say and what not to say, take care of your own mental health, and provide employee education. We're going to talk about a few of these a little bit more in detail. And I always say, we'll talk about this at the end, but it's so important to take care of your own mental health, because you cannot be helpful for others if you are not in a good place yourself. So here's some keys for some communication on what to say and what not to say. I do always like to start with the what not to say first, even though it's on the other side. So things can include, why don't you just snap out of it? Stop thinking those thoughts and move on. Lots of people have it worse than you. It's all in your head. Look at the bright side of things. Why are you being so negative? I think you're being too sensitive. Others have it worse. Why do you let yourself feel this way? So some of those things, like look at the bright side. Lots of people have it worse than you. A lot of people ask me, why can't we say that one? I get why we want to say that, because it can be helpful to think that in a way, but when somebody's struggling in the moment, those type of things diminish what they're feeling in that moment, because somebody's always going to have it worse and someone's always going to have it better, right? Things could always be worse, things could always be better, but in that moment that person is truly struggling, and so it's really validating to know, it matters right now in this moment. Things to say can include, I'm here to talk whenever you want to, what can I do to help or support you, how are you coping, I want to check in with you, I've noticed you've been a little distant, down or sad, what's concerning you today. I love this one. Has work been stressful for you lately? I love when people ask me that one, because I'm like, yeah, and it's a time for me to talk about it. And what do you do to take care of yourself? These are all really helpful things for you to say instead of the other ones. Providing resources. So this is really important, because mental health care, it's not a one size fit all. So we really do need to provide employees with a variety of options. We've seen that definitely here at Nivati, that different people are using different products. So some people like in-person sessions, teletherapy sessions. We see people that don't ever do therapy sessions, but they watch the mental health videos that we have pre-recorded, downloadable resources and articles. We also offer coaching. Coaching's great because some people are so scared to do therapy. There's such a stigma around it. And so coaching can be a great little step into that to get help, as well as showing and providing those phone and text crisis lines and having those around, and knowing that they're out there. So if people are struggling, we know, hey, there's these hotlines that could maybe be helpful for you. Resources for easy accessibility. So this is one of the big reasons a lot of people don't get help as well, right? We know it's one of those barriers. So it helps when employers can provide options that make it convenient. Things like mobile apps, digital solutions, email and chat options, considering company paid therapy options outside of insurance. As a therapist, I do not like working with insurance. Insurance puts too many limits. It requires certain things that I don't always want to feel necessarily ethical doing. And so it is helpful. And insurance right now, therapists that use insurance have a longer wait list as well. I do know that. As well as giving direct access, eliminating the middleman, which is what we see in a lot of EAPs, is the employers needing help, but it's like, who do I go to and who do I turn to? And I have to talk to this person and this person and this person. so that I can talk to the therapist. It gets really difficult, so it's so much easier if we can create a resource for employees to look at what their options are and then get the help that they need. A lot of people will stop using the services if it gets too many steps and if it's too difficult, as well as setting hard limits on a number of sessions. A lot of EAPs do this. A lot of therapists don't love working with EAPs because of that. It's, you know, we can only see them 4 to 6 times, and it's kind of like, well, what can we do with that limited time for some cases? And so it really is great to have. We know that there's more options out there now. There's better new options that provide the ease of access, things like Talkspace, BetterHelp, Blue Novus, as well as Nivati. Of course, we offer all sorts of types of easy accessibility. I always like to include this slide in here. I think it's really helpful to know that these types of support, this type of support is out there. So please use these hotlines and share these types of hotlines. There's the National Suicide Prevention Line, the Hope Line Network, Suicide and Crisis Hotline. There's also the crisis text line for people that feel more comfortable texting. I love that there's a parent hotline to help those that are struggling when it comes to those parenting issues. Postpartum support, international helpline, as well as a national domestic violence hotline. So please know that these are out there and that you can help and provide those to others. So the last one in supporting employees is building a community. Parents are needing more emotional support. 83% of fathers and 69% of mothers report needing more emotional support. They can get this support through a community, because in a community, employees are going to feel less isolated, increased feelings of support. It's going to provide more opportunity for more social interactions, which a lot of parents feel that they don't get anymore. And especially with the pandemic, it creates a support system, knowing, you know, I'm not alone, or I have these people I can count on. And we know also that a sense of community helps build, improve and increase mental well-being. So these are some ideas that we see and that we like for building the community. So there's forums. You can create a space for parents to talk with each other. Our company uses Slack, so you could create a Slack channel where they can share their various experiences, their struggles, get advice from each other. That's just, you know, could be all about parenting, because right now people are really needing that conversation. Providing work sponsored events, things like bring your kid to work, contest involving the kids, like perfect one coming up can be costumes. And if you're all remote, you can do, you know, send your pictures or share your costumes on Slack, however that is. Company parties with kids, online events with or without kids, like a meditation, fun little group meditation could include the kids, which can be really fun for kids to get involved in taking care of their mental health too. And then the last one is company programs. So when it comes to company programs, there's 2 that can be implemented that help with community and the employees' overall well-being. These are some of the favorite things I like to talk about when it comes to mental health, because both of these are shown to reduce stress. So if we can find ways to build some type of program to support these, then it's a really helpful way for your employees and especially the parents. So those 2 that I love to talk about are mindfulness and self-care. So a lot of people I know have heard of mindfulness, but let's talk a little bit more about what mindfulness is. This definition is calmly acknowledging and accepting one's feelings, thoughts, and bodily sensations used as a therapeutic technique. So noticing what's going on in the present moment. And I love that it says used as a therapeutic technique, because we do use it in the therapy office with evidence-based therapy treatments. like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, dialectal behavioral therapy. And we use it for conditions like anxiety, depression, ADHD, PTSD, and so much more. It really is such a helpful proactive tool, as well as a tool that I use when any client comes into my office, no matter what phase they're in their struggles. I always teach about mindfulness. Um, so some of the great ways with mindfulness at work that we've seen it change things in the workplace when there's mindful leaders. There's actually a lot of studies out there that talk about all the benefits of having leaders that are more mindful. Things like lower employee emotional exhaustion, improved work balance for the employees, better employee job performance. It increases their self-confidence, so they're likely to perform better. It also is going to improve their own leadership skills and builds resilience. And then there's also studies showing benefits of having more mindful employees. We see decreased stress levels, improved work engagement, increased creativity, healthier work-life balance, better working capabilities, improved physical health, less substance use, and improved mental health. So, those are some of the things that we talked about of mental health struggles showing up in the workplace. But then we have this answer here of, having more mindful employees helps with those things just right there that we saw was a problem earlier. So some of the some mindfulness practices I always like to share and talk about is having mindfulness practices does show positive impacts on mental health conditions. It reduces the symptoms of depression, anxiety, which are some of the most common we see in the workplace. And it also links to more positive health behavior. So people are going to use more positive coping skills when they're practicing mindfulness. Some examples here, yoga poses can always be great. Yes, yoga can always be the rigorous, physical activity, but it can also be used just for relaxation. Meditation helps with relaxation, mindfulness, calming the brain. There's certain mindfulness activities that are practiced in various evidence-based therapy treatments. Those can be, anything from any of these things, the meditation, the breath work. Breath work's being studied more and more in the mental health field because we know that it helps improve the physical and psychological health for people. And so having various ways to practice mindfulness can be really, really helpful. I think I still wanted to talk about mindfulness for just a minute more. And so with mindfulness, it can be really helpful to create programs in the company where we have a group company meditation mindfulness practice. We can call it a mindfulness practice. Having resources that talk more about mindfulness and getting that involved more into the workplace. I love when I get to do meditation groups for companies because I know that it's going to help their employees that much more. There's also ways you can do it like online groups and have different forums where you talk about, hey, did you do any type of mindfulness practice today? Oh, I did this. Or what did you do for yourself over the weekend? Which also includes the self-care. So the other community program is having some self-care, some options for self-care. I love seeing companies encourage and incentivize when employees are doing self-care things. Things could include, like we just said, providing the mindfulness or meditations in a group. Also creating a comfortable workspace with flexibility. So saying, people can take 5-10 minutes here or there to go and just get away from their desk and away from the work environment. And also it's so helpful when companies talk about mental and physical health and self-care. When the company and the leaders and the managers are talking about it, the employees are going to feel like they're having more support and that they have a community that cares about them. Some employee strategies for self-care. Some of these people don't often think about, but these do include things like a healthy diet, regular physical checkups, and really thinking about when was your last checkup with the dentist or the doctor, making time for exercise or physical activity, having healthy sleep hygiene, take time for relaxing, creating a healthy support system, keeping a regular schedule, read, journal, listen to music you like. Turning off your phone sometimes can be some of the best self-care we can practice. Creating healthy boundaries is very important, and you can create those boundaries such as turning off your phone, but you can create boundaries with phones, things, events, people. Boundaries are extremely important to practice for you to have that self-care, because I mean, the work-life balance, that's creating a healthy boundary, because that's going to allow you time to decompress and do the things that you enjoy. It is so important that we take time out and do things that we enjoy, but then we also encourage others and those that we're working with, those that we manage, to also be doing things that they enjoy, you know, and asking and opening up that conversation. Hey, you know, what are things that make you feel recharged? Have you been able to do any of those types of things lately? So that is it for the presentation, talking about mental health and how mental health is affecting families, employees in the workplace, and what we can do about it. Again, my name's Haeli Harris, and Amelia is usually here. I know she's so sad she could not be, but we are with Nivati, a single platform for your body and mind. I would like to leave this time for any questions. Oh, and I just saw the chat. So yes, thank you. Any questions I can answer for anybody? What is in the toolkit? The mental health fitness toolkit, it has some similar things that we talked about today. I honestly cannot remember everything that's in it. And I know I helped put it together too. That's terrible. Talks about different things that you can do to stay mentally fit. So yeah, some of the things we talked about today will be included in there. And I want to say it's like a PDF type of resource. Any other questions? And thank you, Beth, so much. I'm not going to lie that I was a little bit nervous because I didn't have Amelia here. Motivating a company to implement best mindful practices to help develop team productivity. Suggestions to motivate, I always suggest start talking about it, get it built into conversations, and then see if there's times you can set aside or have little reminders like, hey, did you guys, you know, get your mindfulness in, or get your mindfulness practice in, or hey, everybody, company, 12:30, everyone's going to stop, do 5 minutes of mindfulness, and let's get back to work. It's really about putting it into action, talking about it and putting it into action. Okay, thoughts on time management resources for working parents. I cannot think of any specific resources, but I do think that when we have those time management skills and we're thinking about that time management, I think it does help our mental health, because it's part of that self-care. I don't know if you noticed on there, it said a regular schedule. So it's really important for us to keep regular schedules for ourselves and for our kids, because children like predictability. They like to know what's coming next, and part of why this pandemic really messed up a lot of our children. So I don't know of any specific time management resources. Sorry, Amelia. Okay, anything else? Okay, well, you guys are welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope that you gained some useful information here.